would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to the end of the week, everyone. I hope it has been a fabulous weekend for you. Or not weekend, a fabulous week. Boy, did I botch that. If I was any kind of a professional, I would go back and say that over again. I guess you could. I'll categorize this under keeping it real. The long and the short, hope you had a great week. Happy to report that as I mentioned, I picked someone to win the $50 for the Amazon gift card this month. That person responded toot sweet. And I would like to congratulate Carly from North Carolina. Congratulations on winning the $50 Amazon gift card. It's already sizzling in her inbox, ready for her to spend on whatever she would like. Carly is also interesting because she is a successful flipper. She is someone who has managed to get it done. And I am hoping that perhaps we can have a conversation. Perhaps she can share some of her insights, maybe talk a little bit about the market that she's in and some of the unique things that she's facing, maybe some of the unique challenges. It'd be a great way to get some ground truth from someone who's getting going with their real estate investment strategy. So I'm hoping that we can get Carly to come on the show maybe and chat a little bit about her experiences. I did just pay her $50. So it's not like she doesn't owe me or anything. But in any event, hopefully she'll decide that's good. We've actually already talked about it, and she's fine with it. She's got some stuff going on right now in her life where she needs a little bit of time to get those things squared away. So we'll give her that. And when she's ready to rock and roll and share her wisdom, we'll put it out to everybody. What else? In terms of reaching out, right? Or even better, or both. If you'd like to be in the drawing for next month, because remember now we've given out $250 to 5 lucky winners, 5 lucky listeners of Real Estate Realities, Carly just being the latest. If you'd like to put your hat in the ring to become a member of that illustrious club of folks who've won $50 from me, just head on over to therebelbroker.com, click the little red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to Support the Show. Use the same email address both times you're asked. Answer the handful of questions, and you'll not only then be entered for a chance to win that $50 Amazon gift card, but you're also helping me grow the show, and I absolutely appreciate that. Okay, you can also send a message to me. Click on Contact in the same general area up there at the top of the website, and you can send me a message. So feel free to do that. You can also, there's a little palette over to the right, a bunch of little icons. You can access my Twitter feed, Facebook, Google+, Pinterest, Facebook, everything, all of that stuff. So feel free to take advantage of any of those things. And finally, see, I knew there was one more thing. If you'd like to join the Rebel Underground, and that's a great way to get access to some exclusive content, and folks who are in the Rebel Underground got some of that exclusive content last weekend, just text the word Rebel Broker, the number 44222. That's the word Rebel Broker, all one word, to the number 44222. And then you'll get a reply. It'll make it clear that you're communicating with who you think you're communicating with. Answer the prompts, and you will be in. Is that it for house cleaning? I think it is. You know, one thing, we're going to do a little ground truth. You know, we've talked, I've tried to be exceptionally honest and open every time I'm talking about things I'm dealing with. And I'm in a weird situation. I have been doing this, as I said, since the late 80s. I have been helping people find homes they want to live in, homes they want to invest in, duplexes they want to invest in. There was even several years where my primary focus was helping big offshore investors buy apartment complexes. I have helped experienced investors crunch the numbers and come up with smart strategies to purchase a piece of property. I've done all of this stuff, and I have never hesitated. I've identified what made sense, and I've encouraged people to do that. When we did the How to Set Your Goals series last year, when we were at the end of December of 2015, I opened up a lot about things that I think are the big limiting factors for folks. And for myself, it's that because I went through it today. Right. So I've told you all the things that are in the offing, that I have several different potential paths to pursue and all this other kind of stuff. And today I had this moment of incredible self-doubt. The back of my head was trying to come up with tons of reasons to back off. Well, you know what? Let's not commit to doing this work or take these actions. The fact that even at this point in my life where I've been doing this so long for other people, and I've done it successfully, it's not like I have some sort of built up storehouse of knowledge of all of these horrible failures. Usually the folks I've dealt with where failure was involved, they were coming out of a situation involving a failure where I was helping them recover from it. So there's this bizarre, even for me, someone who has seen all of this go and who has worked through the paperwork and done all the things that folks say scares them about this process. Even with all of that and being able to see success, there is still that self-doubt there. And maybe it's just me. This could just be my own bizarre little foibles at play here. But I'm trying to figure out what it is. At what moment did that start to happen for me? And you know what? I think it was the realization that in a worst case scenario, if this goes really horribly, there's more than just my stuff at risk, right? Because what's just happened? What would have introduced this self-doubt? Well, as I mentioned before, I started going out to my sphere of influence, the folks I have in contact with, to make contact with someone who would be able to provide the funds for me to move forward with different modifications I'm going to make to increase the value of my property. And as soon as the risk extended beyond me and onto someone else, I think that's what kicked it in. So how do you deal with that? Pretend you're as screwed up as I am. And despite the fact you've done your homework and you've got all the numbers, you still have this horrible fear that somehow this will negatively impact someone else. The only way, and I've had my epiphany, right? I was actually holding off on dealing with the money. I didn't even want to, and I finally dealt with it today. I dotted the I's and crossed the T's on getting some work done. The money got deposited in the account. It's going to be used to pay for the work. So all of these things happened, but I kind of had this epiphany moment where I imagined the worst case scenario and realized even if all this is a horrible failure, let's say my projections are totally wrong, right? Let's pretend, and I'm going to use round numbers here. These aren't the exact numbers I've come up with, but let's say I've calculated that as my home exists right now, it's worth about $1 million. And with the improvements I plan on making in a short order, if I was willing to wait, maybe I could make a little more. But in short order, I believe I could sell it with an upgraded kitchen and an upgraded master bath for about $125. I mean, $1.125, right? Let's say that, just to use, maybe that's not as round as I'd like, but basically increase the value of the property by about $120,000 to $150,000, and then only spend maybe half of that or less on the actual work to get that stuff done, right? That's in general strokes the plan. Well, what if that doesn't happen? What's my worst case scenario? Well, my worst case scenario is markets take a tumble. I've already taken this person's money. I've already spent it on this stuff. And now I'm stuck in a marketplace where values have dropped. Now, of course, this is the kind of planning that stops you where you're worried about the possibility of being struck by lightning, right? Because even if this does happen, how much is the market going to go down in short order? How much is the market going to go down in the next 6 months? Because that's really the window I'm talking about doing all this in, right? Despite all of this, there's still this nagging thing in my head. So then I came to the worst case scenario of, okay, let's say I do all this work and I end up only being able to sell it for $950,000 or $900,000, less than what I originally budgeted. And plus now I owe this chunk of change to somebody else. Well, the worst case scenario is I sell it, I still pay them back, and I end up with a whole lot less to put down on another property. And once I say it out loud to myself and it's a done deal, I'm fine. And maybe that's what it'll take for you. Maybe not just doing it on paper, maybe looking at it and saying, yeah, you know, these numbers work. These things look good. Now, remember, I'm a guy who's been doing this for over 25 years. I've done projections and I share it all here. I talk about where I think the market's going to go, where I think prices are going to go. Am I always right? No, but I'm not off by a whole lot. I was off maybe a little bit more last year than I would have expected. I didn't expect prices to jump as much as they did, but in broad strokes, I called it. I said it wasn't going to go up by over double digits, and it didn't. Some areas it did, but the average area, it didn't. So, you know, I don't have a reason from past performance for a whole lot of self-doubt, but still there it was, right? There's some part of, and again, maybe there are some folks who never experienced this. Maybe, and for those of you who have that mindset, you're probably already way more successful than I am. And I envy you, and I hope that you persist and do well. But for the rest of us who come up with every kind of goofy excuse we can to not take the next step for our goal, for what sounds like perfectly reasonable excuses in our head, these things all sounded great to me. If I can't pay this person back, this would ruin their lives. If they can't get this money back, this would ruin their lives. Hands down, no doubt about it. So what's going to happen? All right. So, and then I start going to the absolute worst case scenario. Man, let's say prices drop just 30% in 2 months, and I've just finished the work. And now I'm only going to be able to sell the house for $800,000, $700,000, $600,000. That's never going to happen. It's such an unrealistic expectation that it's never going to happen. But if it does, what happens then? Okay, well, then I'm going to end up with nothing. But I still will have paid back this person who had faith in me and loaned me this money. I may end up living in a van down by the river, but I'm not going to screw up this. I'm not going to let my actions screw up this other person. So there you go. Which also brings us to potentially the downside of taking money like this from family, where you're going to take it a lot more personally if you don't deliver for them. Anyway, I thought I'd share that. I'm not sure if it helps. I'm not sure if it doesn't help. I got to think there's people out there that continually kind of sabotage their own efforts by coming up with what sound like perfectly reasonable excuses to not do something. But my advice to you would be to simply say out loud your very good, very thorough conclusions that come from data and what you know to be true and stuff you verified, and realize the odds of that are so small, it's not going to be a thing, right? Okay. Some interesting tidbits to go over today. And I get some people who say they love to hear me discuss that really personal stuff, and I don't know. If I was on the receiving end, I'm not sure what I'd think of it. I wanted to cover a couple of interesting things. We've got some stuff on rents. We've got some stuff on the automation thing in the world. Of course, links will be to the articles on this. But I think it just continues to inform us of where we're going. There was this is relating to British civil service, but I don't think there's any question that this would apply to American civil servants. A study by a British think tank, Reform, says that 90% of British civil service workers have jobs so pointless they could easily be replaced by robots, saving the government around $8 billion a year. Now, granted, the size of our government is much larger than the British government, so that amount of money that could be saved would be far larger. But if you think that this kind of the stuff doesn't apply to governments in general, you're mistaken. Unfortunately for civil service workers, it seems the study is just the latest in a series of research that won't save their jobs. Oxford University and financial services provider Deloitte, both of whom commissioned their own studies, concur with Reform's conclusions. The Oxford University study said that more than 850,000 public sector jobs could fall to robots over the course of the next decade. So keep an eye out for that. Now, let's dovetail that. There it is, the word of the day, dovetail, into the next article I wanted to share. These all kind of create a train of consciousness here. From Engadget, rethinks workplace robot is now smarter and easier to train. Remember what I said about why this automation move was going to be such a big deal and why it was going to happen so much faster than people are estimating, and why in the areas where it matters most is where it was going to happen fastest. And that's a lot of the jobs that just deals with the stuff that's most easily automatable, right? And how the big deal was the software. It wasn't the hardware anymore. You'd be able to enhance your ability to automate different tasks because the software will get upgraded. Well, here we go. My theory put into an article. New software should make Sawyer is the name of a robot, simpler to use and modify. Think of a warehouse robot, and a huge, cumbersome machine probably comes to mind. They're reliable but difficult to reprogram if you're not a trained specialist. Rethink Robotics is trying to tackle the problem with Sawyer, a one-armed robot with a tablet for a face. A new software update called Intera 5 means it's now easier to program for new custom tasks in the workplace. At its core is a behavior engine that can be visualized like a logic tree, similar to basic coding applications. That makes it easier for people to change specific movements and if this, then that style reactions. And this one will blow you away. Sawyer's best trick is still its tech by demonstration feature. Users can move the arm around and trigger different components by hand, such as its wrist-worn camera, to show what a task should look like. Sawyer will then remember the steps and replicate them on demand. A fast, simple way for businesses to automate construction, diagnostics, and repairs. When something went wrong, however, it would be tricky for untrained workers to source and fix the problem because parts of the underlying code were hidden or difficult to find. Now the robot should be easier to tweak, making initial deployments and complex reassignments faster. So basically, it's got a camera. You can show it what it's supposed to do, and it learns what to do based on what you show it. It can look for things out of place. So if you go and you check out the article for this, for instance, this robot can look at an engine to analyze what's wrong with it, and it can see this wire is not attached or this thing is not to specification. This is the stuff. This is a generic arm that can be taught to do anything. And you don't even need to be a programmer to do it. So there you go. There's two more for the pile. I honestly think that this revolution in labor is going to happen faster than anyone thinks. Again, it's a software thing. Software tends to do these weird leapfrog things where very quickly, suddenly you can do things with the exact same hardware that you wouldn't have imagined 1 year before. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, I'll be keeping an eye out for it for you. It's going to revolutionize everything. Okay, next on our list is New York City rents no longer too damn high as landlord concessions soar. I found this to be very interesting. It dovetails into what we're going to be talking about in the second half of today's show. Average rental price, January of 2017 in Manhattan, $3,933. The change from December of 2016 to January 2017, down 2.7%. The change from January of 2016 to January 2017, down 3.4%. It was $4,073 a month 1 year ago this month, and now it's $3,933. The number of new leases, down 9.6% month over month, down 4.8% year over year. The inventory in January of 2017, 6,959. January, 6,108. So keep that in mind. Remember, we talk about supply and demand a lot here, and the relationship of how those two things move together can tell you a lot. Now, from January 16th to January 17th, we saw an increase of 13.9%, but a month-to-month change of down 1.8%. So we're not seeing ridiculous numbers here. But I mean, one thing that's fueling this is more rentals coming on the market, more vacancies in terms of apartments coming onto the marketplace. But it's interesting to see this. 31% of New York City apartments rented in January included some form of rent concessions, a record high and nearly double the 16.4% from last January. Manhattan landlord concessions reached a new record as rental price trends remained softest at the top. Concessions rose to 30.9%, nearly double the 16.4% share of a year ago. The market share of concessions for two-bedroom apartments was the highest at 34.9%. So it's interesting to note things like this changing. Does this mean that renters are homeowners or property owners who are landlords are in a huge amount of trouble? Not really. There's still decent rents going here. I suppose if someone thought they were buying at the top of the market, there might be at a point where they hadn't reached the top of the market, that might be a problem. But it's interesting that these are all some of the same challenges that are going to be faced out here in the West. There are lots of new apartments that are going to come online in 2017. Remember, we had the largest jump in rental units in San Francisco and in Silicon Valley in 2016, with more on the way. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects sort of the general rental marketplace as affordability really becomes more of the focus. Folks willing to not rent that single family residential in favor of the apartment simply for financial reasons. But it could be an interesting trend that we see continuing on through the year. So we'll keep an eye on that and see if that spells a needed change in strategy for someone who's considering investing in any of those markets. All right, we're going to take a quick break right here, but when we come back, we're going to talk about a kind of interesting topic. This is one we cover. This is something that HomeUnion does every year with the highest and lowest rent changes. So it lets you know the growth in these rental markets. Good stuff to know if you're someone who's looking to become a landlord who's going to buy and hold and rent out these properties. What's going to be super interesting is, as we've discussed before, there are some very surprising communities that are the worst. So we'll talk about that in a second. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right. Aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We are taking a look at HomeUnion's latest article on the highest yielding single-family rental markets. This is a list we go to pretty frequently. They put one out. I'm not sure if they do it every month or is it every quarter, but I know we talked about this the last time it came out, which would have been, God, I want to say we did it in November or early December. But anyway, this is the latest one, and the rankings have absolutely changed. So we're going to talk about the highest yielding and lowest yielding markets here. I think what I'll do is start off just giving you, now these are the 2017 yields, right? This is based on strictly on single family residential, the highest yielding markets. And then I'll give you a little bit. I don't want to, obviously their narrative on this is going to give away all the payoff of these great communities. So I'll sort of run through that after we've gotten the numbers here. But I think you're going to hear a lot of familiar communities. It's interesting how over the last week, we've had so many different ways of looking at different markets, whether it was the best place to live in America according to New York News, or whether it was tech jobs or whatever else. Interesting how much crossover there has been in some of these lists lately. But let's go ahead and start with the highest yielding single family residential markets. Now coming in at number, okay, yeah, these are the top 10. Coming in at number 10 is Detroit at 6.9%. And I'm always honest, Detroit always just seems like such a challenging market in terms of if you don't have ground truth there, you are in deep, deep trouble. So I'm happy that it's made this list. There's obviously some sort of recovery going on there in some areas because folks are making money to make it one of the top 10 places to go for yield on a single family residential home. So more power to you. Next on our list should sound familiar. Charlotte, North Carolina, 7.1% 2017 yield. Tampa, Florida, again, another one we talked about yesterday and the day before, 7.1% again. Jacksonville, Florida, 7.4% in terms of yield for 2017. Another city that was on our list yesterday, Chicago, 7.5%. Atlanta coming in at 7.6%. Philadelphia comes in at number 4 with 7.9%. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Memphis, Tennessee coming in at 8.5% in its 2017 yield. Columbia at 9.3%. And number 1 on the list, Cleveland, 10.9%. And this is one of those lists that got me excited about Chattanooga. For those of you who've been listening a very long time, you know that I got all excited about Chattanooga because there were several things that came together. One, it had amazing yield increases in the year that it was on that list. It was also at the same time getting some news because it had built a high-end fiber optic network for the entire city. The city had gone to the expense of doing that, and that was causing kind of a big tech boom downtown. So there were a lot of things coming together that just sounded great to me. So it kind of really put it on my radar. I'm still kind of excited about it. I still have a home search running on realtor.com for that area. And every time I do the math, it's encouraging. So I don't know why I don't just get off my butt and get out there and do something. But let me read some of the tidbits here. None of that sexy. Cleveland leads the nation with first-year yields. Now remember, that's first-year yields. So these are folks who bought 1 year ago, and this is the yield that they've earned on the home at this point, right? So it's a great number. It's not people who've owned forever. It's people who've just owned for the last year. So this is their first year yield of 10.9% for investment housing, while Orange County offers, well, I'm giving away the big payoff on the other list. Orange County offers the lowest yields on average single family residential investors, 3%. Quote, strictly based on yields and not accounting for employment growth and future rental demand, Cleveland, Columbia, South Carolina, and Memphis top our list of single-family residential markets for returns. In these metros, investors stand to gain big with a small initial investment over a shorter-term horizon. We love those here. We try to push those here. That's one reason why I like to refer to it as barrier to entry. How easy is it to get in there in terms of how much of a leap do you have to make with the amount of money you have to come up with to acquire these properties for investment purposes? On the other hand, Orange County, and I'm not going to tell you the other ones, will provide single-family residential buyers with the lowest yields on their investments. At this stage in the real estate cycle, investing in these markets doesn't pencil out for most buyers. And we're going to talk about those because, again, the biggest buzzword markets where an awful lot of folks, I do occasionally check out other folks' stuff, what they're promoting, what they're saying you should be focusing on. And I disagree so strongly with some of them. And I get listeners who listen to my show and other shows who will go, hey, check this out. Here is what this other podcaster is saying we should be spending our money on. And I totally disagree. I come at it from a completely different angle. Because for my money right now, and I've said this before, if I owned a piece of real estate in San Francisco and I had bought it relatively recently and I was making 3%, 4%, 2%, whatever, I would sell that thing and I would buy 4 homes in Cleveland and rent them and make more on my money, right? If I'm making 10.9% or 10% for just rounding it down, that's a heck of a lot better than what's going on in some of these other cities. So let's talk about these other cities. You've probably already guessed what a couple of these are. But number 10 on the list is Riverside, California. California is going to figure prominently in this list, not to give away too much. Riverside, California was showing only 4.5%. And remember, these are average numbers. So there's going to be folks below and above that. But that's the average number. Portland, Oregon, 4.3. Tons of lists, right? That's supposed to be the really hot market. And folks who bought last year, when folks were screaming about how hot Portland was 1 year ago and bought based on that advice. And that's one of the ones that I had folks contacting me about, saying, here's other guys saying, oh, buy in Portland, you're going to do great. You're going to make a killing. Top 10 worst yields on single family residential. Denver. This one, and again, people are going to poo-poo that opinion simply because they're going to say, well, it's just because people are having to pay more right now, but in the longer run, you'll make more. Well, that may be true. But what about folks who have strategies that don't include buying and holding forever? Maybe you're someone who buys, holds on the short term. Maybe you want to make money faster. I'd rather make $1 today than $2 in 2 days. This week, if I can get a dollar in my hands this week, I'd rather take that than $2 next week. It tends to be what I emphasize on. Now, if you want to say I can have $1 today or $200 next week, that might be a different calculation in my head. But again, that's because the situation's different. Anyway, so Portland, 4.3%. Denver, Colorado, 4.2%, coming in at number 8 on the worst returns list. And I think that I think that's so true is just because it's so difficult to get a good deal in Denver. Every time I talk to someone who's trying to buy a single family residential home in Denver, I'm hearing about multiple offer scenarios, and that, it's hard to get a good deal where you're going to enjoy a bigger yield. And if you're going to make the argument that you're nowhere near the top end on Denver, I'm not so sure that's true. That would be a concern for me. Oakland comes in at 3.9% yield after 1 year. Oakland is nuts. Oakland saw like an express train to attempted gentrification. I've talked to a few folks who live there. And as I've mentioned before, there was a period of time in the 90s when I drove an ambulance, and I did end up in Oakland a few times. It's one of the few places I've ever had anyone throw stuff at me or shoot at me. Well, not the only place. It's a long story, but yes, I've been shot at, once in Oakland and once out in the desert out of Los Angeles. That's a story for another time. So Oakland, 3.9%. Seattle, 3.6%. So remember, these are just getting worse. This is the top 10 worst. We started at the least worst, and we're going to the worst. Seattle, 3.6%. San Diego, 3.5%. Los Angeles, 3.5%. And here we are. We are arriving in my stomping grounds. This is where my stuff happens. San Francisco, California, 3.2% return on investment after 1 year. And even worse than San Francisco, San Jose, California comes in at number 2 at 3.1% return. And Orange County comes in at 3%. So I think those are very interesting numbers, and I think it really brings home how the popular headline conventional wisdom of an awful lot of folks doesn't do it. You need to dig in here and figure out, even though it may sound sexy to own an investment property in San Francisco, I think it's not a good investment. I don't think it's a good investment in your time or your money or your effort. I think you could, if you've got a chunk of money where you could buy something in San Francisco, I think your short-term return on that investment is going to be much better elsewhere. And I think, and here's the other thing, and this really depends on your risk level, right? So I like at least a little bit of continuity in my market. And so many of these markets, you can look at them going all the way back to before the downturn and look at what the volatility was. How much volatility was there in this marketplace when the downturn occurred, right? Because what's volatility? Volatility causes a bunch of things. It causes people to freak out. Remember, and anytime there is uncertainty in a marketplace, and this is a theme we talk about a lot, uncertainty affects us right after the Fed raises interest rates, right? And then interest rates go up as a response to that until everyone realizes, oh, wait, well, you know what? That really doesn't affect interest rates that much. And then interest rates for lending start to go down again. And then we had them go back up again. Well, over the last 4 days, what's happened? Interest rates have gone down. In fact, it'd probably be wise to cover those numbers here at the end of the show. So much of this stuff is linked up with what people believe is true versus what's actually true. And I think a lot of the markets play into that. But it just makes sense for you to look a little bit more deeper into these things and realize that you can do a lot better in markets that maybe don't sound as sexy. Just because let's be honest for a second. If you're at a dinner party, I don't even, does this, all right, I'm just going to do it. You're at a dinner party, you're dressed up, you're looking good, you're feeling good because you're a successful investor. You're getting 10.9% return on investment after the first year on those properties in Cleveland. There's lots, and you happen to be a male who identifies as male and who enjoys the company of females. And you go up and you're thinking, I want to dazzle, I want to put on a little dazzle, I want to demonstrate my acumen and my prowess. Yeah, I don't mean to brag or anything, but, I bought in Cleveland a year ago and made 10.9%. That doesn't sound very sexy, right? There's not a lot of sexiness. Would you like to go and see my investments in Cleveland? How does that line go? Does that work on anybody? But if you say, you want to see my investments in San Francisco, of course, you'll be driving to those investments in a Yugo because you're only making 3.2% on that investment in San Francisco. But there's a certain amount of prestige associated with a certain locations. And what is nuts, and something I've never understood about the real estate world, is way back when I first got started in real estate, I was a freshly minted, I still had that new box smell realtor. And back when it happened, double-breasted suit with big pads, and I had a perm. That was me in late 1988, early 1989. And I started off in Mountain View, which is just south of Palo Alto, which is where Stanford is. And this is a community where zip code and city matter. I had people who were willing to spend way more money for a crappier house in Palo Alto that was literally only 3 minutes away from a better house, cheaper house, just down the road, but in another city and zip code, because it was Palo Alto. This is a place where Los Altos, right? There's a town called Los Altos, and there's a part of what used to be part of Los Altos called Los Altos Hills. Well, at the time when I started, that was all one zip code. But because there was such a price difference between Los Altos Hills and Los Altos, the folks in Los Altos Hills were like, oh, well, we should have our own zip code. And suddenly the status symbol became having because there were people who would use Los Altos Hills as their address, but it wasn't in Los Altos Hills, but they'd use the same zip code. It was all the same zip code. So to the post office, it didn't matter. It all went to the right place, right? And since folks were co-opting that prestige, they got their own zip code. And it actually worked. There was no number of homes reason to do it. There was no population reason to do it. They just got their own zip code. It was ridiculous. But anyway, man, did I just go in the weeds on that one. But the point is don't let that stupid stuff play into it for you. As an agent, I would frequently point out to people that maybe you're better off spending $160,000 less and getting a better house that's in a different zip code, but 3 minutes away or closer to work. A lot of people don't think that way, though. So there you go. All right, let's go ahead and talk numbers. Let's talk. Boy, I feel like I just completely should re-record that whole last part of the show. I went so far into the weeds, I feel like I should be apologizing. Let's go ahead and pull up mortgage rates and see if they're still. As of today, as of right now, I checked these earlier today, and they had not gone up, but they've gone up 0.01. But over the last 3 days, 3 or 4 days, they'd actually gone down. They're actually down from the last time we talked about it. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage is currently at 4.13%. The 15-year fixed rate mortgage is at 3.34%. All of these are only up by 0.01. FHA 30-year fixed is at 3.75. Jumbo 30-year fixed 4.26. 5/1 adjustable rate mortgage 2.99. What's interesting is the sexiest rate that's in there is that adjustable rate because it's closer to its 52-week low than any of the others. Yeah. Anyway, thought I'd share those because we're still seeing what I think are perfectly fine interest rates in terms of borrowing. All right. As always, it is my hope that you have gotten a excellent level of return on investment for the time you've invested in listening to today's show. I hope we've given you some great things to think about, maybe some things that might even prepare you for that longer road towards reaching your goals. And hopefully given you some interesting places to consider that are showing some great returns and turning your eye away from those places that may sound sexy, but really the better returns are sexy, aren't they? So let's focus on those. Worry a little bit less about these other areas that may be very enticing for whatever headline reason is floating around out there, but in reality aren't giving you the short-term returns that you really should be shooting for in your investment strategies. Thanks again for listening, everybody. I'll talk to y'all next time.